Good afternoon and welcome. We are so happy that you are here and that you have stuck around for today's parish meeting. I want to start with a thank you to all of you and also a thank you to the food haulers. I see them in the kitchen. I don't know if they can hear us, but thank you once again for a wonderful lunch. When I was thinking about the meeting today and thinking about those of you, some of you, when I hear parish meeting, I see you in my head, and I know you are going to be here, and I am so deeply grateful for you. And I thought about this reading from a former colleague of mine when I was in Philadelphia. He was retiring from a parish in New Jersey, and his name was Rudy Nemser. And he was just this absolutely crotchety, curmudgeonly guy, and I adored him. So I love this reading that he wrote, and it's called Long Haul People. You find them in churches when you are lucky. Other places too, though I mostly only know ecclesiastical varieties. These are the long haul people, upon whose shoulders and pocketbooks and casseroles and daylight and nighttime hours a church is built and maintained after the brass is tarnished and the cushions need restitching. They pay their pledges full and on time, even when the music is a bit too modern. They support every canvas, even though the sermons aren't always short. They mow the lawn and they come to supper. They teach children school when there is no one else, and even though they know they'll miss the service. If you ask them what they think of the minister, or plans for the kitchen renovation, or the choral anthem, or the Christmas pageant, or the color of the paint in the bathroom, they will reply, individuals and fashions arrive and pass. Their community, their congregation will be here, steady and hale for a long, long time. It will be here because the long haul people bless a community with a very special blessing. Many of you are the long haul people, and we are so deeply grateful for you.
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you, everyone, as Kelly said, for showing up. We really appreciate this because the work we do on the governance team, really when it comes down to meetings like this, is where we see sort of the rubber hit the road and we're able to tell you what we've been up to, get your feedback, and really start plotting to move forward. So today, we have quite an agenda where we're going to step through the strategic planning process that we've been working on throughout this year, talk about what the board has been doing, our board focus for the next 6 months, talk about the nomination committee and vote on members, talk about our capital campaign, which was quite good, so we have some good news there. Our sustainability task force is going to be reporting in. They've been meeting for the last 6 months, and they've been doing a lot of good and hard work, and they're going to be giving you all an update on some findings that they have. We're going to talk about the roof and the prow restoration that's going to be starting to take place in a few months, so Dave Weber is going to give everyone just an overview on that. We're going to talk about our mid-year financial report, so Monica is going to tell you where we stand at this point. We're going to talk about the interim minister search, and also, last but not least, our music director search. So there's been a lot that has been happening in the last 6 months. And actually, everyone who's been taking part in governance has really been putting a lot of time, heart, and effort into making sure that our future is secure and quite bright. So, first, just to talk about the strategic plan. Yes, Chip? And I'd like to thank Chip, who's our secretary, who is very good at not only keeping us super organized, but, well, on task. So first, we do have to approve the minutes from our last meeting back in September. Do I have a motion? Okay, Dorrit, motion. Do I have a second? Okay, Harry Carnes, second. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, it passes. Thank you, Chip. Please feel free to keep interrupting as I miss things. So the strategic plan, so this is something that really started about 2 years ago. Rob Savage, when he was president of the Board of Trustees, brought forth that we should be doing a strategic plan and really coming up as a board, along with input from the congregation and staff, what should be our long-term strategies and what should be our long-term focus for our congregation. And so we held an actual planning session back in August. Many of the members of our various committees and task forces attended, along with all board members. And we really started to talk about what are the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. Basically, we did a SWOT analysis as we saw it for our congregation. The staff did the same thing with a staff retreat discussing a SWOT in September. From that, we actually derived an open question to you all that we had this past September at our parish meeting, where we asked a question to help sort of steer us as to what type of visions of ministry we should be creating, and if we needed to redo the ones that we have, which we ended up retailoring them a bit, and we'll be getting into that. We also created visions of organizational health. That was also part of the SWOT discussion and various discussions that we had around the congregation. We also had special board and staff meetings to create targeted outcomes for each vision. So we're really at that point where we have looked at the visions and thought, what type of outcomes will drive these visions? And our next step now is to put goals around that. So staff is looking at the various visions and outcomes that we have come up with. They're starting to put goals around them, timelines, and how they will accomplish that. So all of this is for the next fiscal year that we are doing that. So that'll all start taking place in July. And what the nice thing is having taken part in this process now for the second time, is we made a lot of significant improvements in the strategic planning process, and we found a lot of areas that we have to improve on still yet. So this is going to be an iterative process every year on year, where hopefully we will, at the end of the day, continue to advance having a better strategic plan along with creations of the visions. So now Kelly's going to come up and talk about our visions of ministry. Thank you.
I'm going to pretend I know what to do with this clicker. Woohoo, it worked. I was just going to look at Steve and give him the eye, and then he would make it. Yeah, see, he takes care of me. He knows. So, visions of ministry, as Joe mentioned, we had the fall parish meeting, and the open question was something like, where do you want to grow personally, and how can FUS partner with you in that work? And what we did was a small group of us. It was me, and it was Dorrit Bergen and Mart Schweitzer. And we got together and we read through every single response from the open question. The facilitators took great notes and sent them along. We read through all of them and we said, what are we seeing in these responses? And so we have these 3 new visions of ministry. One thing you might notice that is new in these is that the visions of ministry have these 2-word in front of them: within us, among us, and beyond us. This is new for this year. And this was an idea we had about helping us to remember that our visions of ministry are about where we hope that you all are going personally, where we hope that we are going together as a community, and the fact of that last one, that our work is not for us alone, but our work needs to be impacting the wider world as well. So what do we hope is happening? What is our vision within us and among us and beyond us? So they are: within us, enhance opportunities for spiritual, intellectual, and personal growth. Among us, nurture members in all stages of life and commit to build deeper connections. And beyond us, embody our UU principles in the larger community as we engage in outreach, service, advocacy, and activism. And so, as Joe mentioned, the board now, and you will see this in May, the board has made outcomes under each one of these that say to the staff, this is what we hope will happen with this vision. And staff are in the process right now of creating their goals for the coming year based on those outcomes. All right, and now Monica's going to tell us about our visions of organizational health.
I think I'm okay. Thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm Monica Nolan. I'm the executive director here at FUS. Joe and Kelly did a wonderful job at telling you a little bit about the history of our strategic planning process. Hopefully you're all familiar with the visions of ministry. These visions of organizational health are really what sets the stage and allows us to do that really deep work. So there's 5 different visions of organizational health that we've identified for the next fiscal year. And the first one is, we want to create an environment in which all staff feel supported, honored, and confident in their ability to fulfill their positions. I mean, without that, it's going to be hard to do the work that we need to do in order to support you all. The second vision of organizational health is identifying and executing ways to improve the consistency, efficiency, and efficacy of internal and external marketing and communications. I'll do a little plug here. We're really excited about starting a communications ministry team, and I see so many people nodding. I think that means you should join the ministry team. So many of you must have expertise in this area. You have experience in the area of marketing and communications. Please join us. Help us ensure that the messaging that we're doing internally and externally really matches our values and where we want to go. The third is we want to, deep breath, revisit our financial opportunities and responsibilities to ensure they allow our mission to flourish. Address fiscal challenges that our institution faces in meeting its operating and capital needs while remaining aware of our current resources and those we can confidently anticipate in the future. Let's think about that more when we're looking at our mid-year financial review. We're in really lovely financial shape, but we need to be thinking 10 steps ahead about where things can go and how can we prudently set up our institution to support it. Fourth, we are going to begin this next year implementing the capital projects approved during the capital campaign. And those include the meeting house restoration projects, that's the roof and the prow. We will be sure to implement sustainability endeavors such as solar, the boiler repairs to ensure we all have heat, and atrium enhancements. And then last but not least, we want to facilitate the successful transition of the senior minister and music director positions. You heard a little bit about that in Karen's sermon today. I think it's something we'll continue to sit with. I would note that all of these, somebody might have mentioned this already, but all of these have an outcome and a goal underneath. Those goals aren't just for staff members. Those goals are for board members and parishioners. So I hope you were listening. We'll have ample time in May to think about what these visions of organizational health and visions of ministry are and how you can help implement all of these things over the next year. All right.
Thank you. All right. And we are going through all these pretty quickly, but that's because in May we're going to get into them a little bit more in depth as we have more of a plan around them and the goals so we can talk more in depthly. So from the board standpoint, one thing that we had, all members of the board that are here, would you mind standing up? We have Chip, we have Dorrit, I know John is here, March is here, and we don't have Maureen or Michael. But one thing that was really interesting through the beginning of this year, so we've been together as a board for just over 6 months. Some of us have carried over, some have been new. But the board really looking at the strategic plan, we were all excited And then when we came to realize that what we were really talking about was next fiscal year, we were trying to think about what do we want to do in these upcoming 6 months? Because with the transitions that we have coming up and everything else, we want to make sure that we are actively engaged, not just next fiscal year, but also building up into that. And so we came up with 3 points that we always talk about at our board meetings. We just started this last month. But we always look at what is our governance during the interim period? How are we going to be continuing to manage FUS while we have an interim minister? So to that end, the interim search task force is actually putting together recommendations for us, and we're going to be reviewing them on the 21st at our meeting. If anyone's interested, Wednesday, February 21st, 6:30 in the living room, we will be having the board meeting where we're going to be talking about how is the interim minister going to work within our current governance process. And we're going to be debating that. And anyone who's interested in coming to that, please feel free. If you do, there's a bonus. You can see what I consider to be a chalice, which is that massive fireplace in the living room. We get a nice fire going there, so we make it nice and warm, and we have good discussions around that. So we're constantly thinking about that. How are we going to be working with an interim, and how is the process that works well here going to continue through that period of change, where we will have change, but not too much change at the same time. We also want to improve, as Monica was mentioning, and this has been hot on the board for the last year or so, is improving our communications, both internally and externally. Because a number of us, I mean, we all take communications in differently. Some of us like Twitter, some of us like Facebook, some of us like to read it in the red floors, in the hard copy, in the electronic copy. We want to be sure that we're continuing to look at how we need to evolve our communication so that we all internally know what's going on, we know what you all are thinking, so that we all can, as a community, adapt and continue to improve as we wish, but then also, how do we carry our message forward to the external community? And the third, but not least, and this is something that really we've been talking about since, if you remember, the Growth Task Force recommendations from a few years ago, is really hospitality. How do we welcome new members? How do we welcome in visitors? How do we help grow our congregation and make a bigger impact in the world? And we believe that its significant starting point is through radical hospitality. Just be welcoming. So these are the 3 things that we are really thinking about over the next 6 months as we are working on this larger strategic plan, along with dealing with everything else. So next, we would like to talk about the nominations committee. So part of our governance structure, it was mentioned at today's, within today's service, at least at the 9 o'clock, talking about how we have this new governance process that we put into effect not too long ago. It's been about 7, maybe 8 years, and we've been slowly ramping it up. And what we've been trying to do is to expand the actual governance process that we have established. We haven't been fully following the process that we set forth, and it's always an on-ramp. And so now as a board, we are really trying to increase this, and I believe where this starts, the right governance process starts with the nominations committee. The nominations committee is charged with helping to find members of the community to get involved in governance. If we have enough members in governance, enough members with different opinions, that we can start looking at what the community wants holistically, and we have these people within the governance process, things are going to go better for all of us. So the nominations committee is quite important. So we have 4 members that we would like to approve at today's meeting. If you'd stand up if you're here. Alicia Anderson, Chris Carlson. Is Chris here? No? Patty Whitty. Well, we won't hold that against him. Patty Whitty. Thank you. And Rachel Weiss. Okay. So what we'd like to do now as a congregation, as membership, is to vote on these members. Would anyone like to make a motion for the vote? Who was that? Oh, we have Steve Goldberg. Second coming from Liza. Right. All in favor? Any opposed? Whew. Okay, good. We're all right. Well, congratulations. And I truly can't stress enough how important it is for people to get involved in the process. I mean, I'm kind of preaching to the choir at this point because many of you always come to our meetings, you're actively engaged. but we need to expand this to more members as much as we can. So if you all feel like just sort of going out amongst our membership and trying to encourage people who you know would like to become involved in governance, we would appreciate it, because it is fun, it is fulfilling, it's a lot of work, but you get something out of it. I've always gotten something out of every single step for the last 4 or 5 years as I've had different roles within governance. It's a great learning opportunity. So it isn't just giving back to the community, but you too truly get back yourself something. So, all right, next up is capital campaign. Matthew, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here's the clicker. That goes forward.
Left is forward?
Left is forward, I think. Let me see. Nope, left is backwards.
Is this one working? Great. Good to see everybody. We've been working on the campaign for about a year now, and good news, bad news situation with the sun. We're not really going to be able to see some of this highlight reel, but I did just want to share some of I think we've really gotten to see FUS at its best. This is a family activity that Kelly and others led over in the landmark, and then we have a photo from the gala that took place in here, and folks who have helped participate. And really it's been a team effort, and we've had a lot of fun along the way. And I'm happy to be here today for just a couple of minutes to share where we've come to date and what our next steps are. So a quick reminder of what we set out to do. These numbers and goals have been pretty stable. We're aiming to raise just over $3.5 million to help support projects over in the landmark and over here. And this is how far we've come. We're closing in on almost $3 million. The number keeps going up and drips and drops here and there, so this isn't by any means a final number. And I wanted to share with this group where the pledges of support have come from. So we can see by and large about 350 families associated with FUS have really supported the lion's share of the capital campaign. So we can say thanks to everyone in this room and who's a part of the congregation yourself. Thank you. And we've also gotten some really fortunate timing. We have some insurance money coming in to help take care of some hail damage that took place on the landmark side of things. And we've had a couple of grants come in as well. And we still have some next steps. So what I'm going to do is paint a picture of if the campaign were to end today, where things would stand with our different project goals, and then I'll wrap up by saying what the remaining steps to go are and other places where we think we may still see some movement on the campaign. So we anticipate fully funding the projects that we need, the first 3 projects that we need with the structural and roof repair on the landmark building. Also fully funding the prow replacement, and there's been a grant dedicated specifically for that. And also we really want to get a second boiler in, so we have some redundancy in the heating system over in the landmark side of things. Over here in the atrium, we're approaching our halfway goal for a one-time mortgage pay down that we want to make for the mortgage that we hold on this building, and I'll say more about that in a second. We want to finish off some of the atrium enhancements that were designed but never quite implemented for this space, so we want to fund those fully. And we're aiming to provide the solar team or the sustainability task force with about half of the goal that we had originally started, but I think when we hear from the sustainability task force a little bit later on, they're going to talk about some potential third-party funding opportunities that they've identified that might complement some of what we've been able to do with the capital campaign. So wrapping up, I just want to reiterate that I think we've really made tremendous progress, and we started out with the goal of fixing a leaky roof and paying down a mortgage, and here we are almost $3 million later, and we've had tremendous success. As we're wrapping up, we're really wrapping up our internal push for the capital campaign, so this will probably be the last time that we ask anybody to pledge to the campaign. One of the last milestones that might be within reach, based on the way that we've been paying down our mortgage over the past few years and based on the amount that we still hold on that, if we were able to raise $600,000, we would really starting to really benefit from savings at an annual level in our annual operating budget. So we're about $65,000 away from that goal right now, so if you have friends who haven't yet pledged or are on the edge and they're thinking maybe it's too late, today would be a great time to tell them, they're still accepting pledges, and if we just move the needle a little bit further, we're really going to start to see the benefits year in and year out to our operating budget from this campaign. So as we wind down the internal activity with the campaign, there are still some outside opportunities that we're pretty optimistic about. We have a really great grants team that has some great leads and some applications in process, and I think there's still some external audience opportunities that we haven't fully realized that we'll keep working through. So that's, yeah, through some crowdsourcing and some other targeted community outreach. I think the active fundraising is going to wrap up in about September of this year, and all of the capital campaign activity we intend to wrap up in 2020. That's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Matthew. Now, Pat Egan and the team. In fact, I'm not going to co-op your presentation. I'll let you.
Right forward.
Right. Yeah, we found that out.
I guess this one.
If you.
Okay. My name is Pat Egan, and I've been the chair of the Sustainability Task Force. And is anybody here from the task force? Janice is here. Okay, I guess it's just the two of us. So Janice, don't tell them what I told you. So we have a pretty technically focused group. Those are the members up there, and there's a lot of expertise here. There's at least 3 retired professors on this bunch, and I had to. I'm glad this worked because I want to put some humor into this part of it, but this is sort of where we are technically focused, and I think we've made some progress on a couple things. So I'm going to share 3 of them with you. The first one is that the board approved that Sustainable Engineering Group bid with committed funding from the Raglan's. Janice, who's over here.
I know you need to read from there, but when you turn your face that way, I listen for a hard time.
Got it. Okay, is this better? Now I need a mirror. Tell you what, I'm going to go. What we did was the board approved this bid that we got from Sustainable Engineering Group to fund, it was funded by the Raglan's Janice Knapp Cordes and Mark Schultz to improve the efficiency of the current geothermal system. This was something that wasn't quite working right, and will have financial benefits to drop the costs, our operating costs for energy in the future. The second thing is we got interested in, as we went into this, the building is incredibly complicated, as you can imagine, with the old one and the new one. And so our idea was to get a better handle on how we could make the buildings more energy efficient. And so the second bullet point here allows us to do this. So the important point is that we had to come up with a metric. How do we know we're making progress? And that metric's going to be a carbon footprint. You can do, Mark, if he's here, did a kind of back of the envelope one, but we want to do a detailed one that gives you an idea of how well we're doing from a sustainability standpoint. So that's the carbon footprint thing. So the second bullet item allows us to do that and also save money make better decisions on energy efficiency. Then the last part we have to share with you is that we're proceeding with requests for proposals to look at on-site solar panels, which would be just restricted to the flat roof part of this building, and to further develop plans that allow us to optimize member involvement in this solar idea, because we developed a set of guiding principles which could actually lead us to going carbon negative or carbon neutral. And with the solar panels just here, we get, maybe 10 to 15% of what the annual energy generation would be. But we think we can do better, and so that's a subject for further development. But we also could actually pursue solar in a low-income development. We don't have to just do solar here, but we could offset our carbon footprint in other locations as well. So, the three takeaways are: one, we're going to use carbon footprint as a metric to move ahead, and the first two things take care of that. We're going to look at the flat roof focus for an on-campus solar thing here. We're going to do due diligence so we can make some good decisions on that, with the possibility of an off-campus kind of an option as well. And the funding part of it is interesting because that was brought up before. There are two parts to that, or two possibilities we've looked at. And the good news is on the committee we have a couple of solar financial folks. One is to develop a solar co-op where other people might invest in buying the solar panels. And then the second thing is there's something called PACE funding, which allows you to make improvements, energy efficiency improvements in solar, that you still pay the same amount on your energy bill, but it's covered through that, so you don't get immediate benefit from your improvements. That's probably not the best way to say it, but anyway, those are the two things we're looking at. Any questions? My 5 minutes is up. Okay, great, thanks.
One thing I want to say with all of these groups that we pulled together, really, and I've said it before, is everyone is so committed. So this group has spent hours upon hours looking at the various options and really starting to try to plot out how best to start implementing this. So thank you, Pat. You and all of you, you've done a great job. Now, Dave Weber, are you in? Dave's in the room.
I am in the room. Well, I'm Dave Weber. I've been a member for, 30 so years, and I'm the owner's representative for the roofing project. And for those who weren't here 10 years ago, I was the owner's representative for this big building project. And there's nothing to see, but what's going on underneath the surface is a small group of us have been meeting, and one of the first things we realized was that as church members, we knew we had no engineering and design expertise. And so what we've done is hired a construction manager at risk, because we realized not only do we not know engineering, we don't know how to evaluate engineers. And so we've contracted with Findorf to be our wranglers for the design process. And we went along the direction of engineering because we have no intention of changing the visible design of the building, but we want to strengthen up the parts that you don't see that hold the roof up. So what's happening next week is the Findorf virtual survey team will arrive with a laser scanner and climb up in the attic space in the Landmark Auditorium and start doing laser measurements of all the structural elements with millions of plus points, and it's accurate to a 64th of an inch. And through massive computing power, they can reassemble that into a blueprint-like thing that you can maneuver and look around. And then the engineer will start working on it, and then we'll come up with some plans on what to do. We've blocked off to do the construction. We've blocked off the months of May to September. We haven't scheduled any weddings or anything else because that's when we plan it will go on. But basically everything that you see over there that's covered in copper is in play to be improved and resurfaced. And I have a staff email. I'm davew@fusmadison.org. And that's a good way to contact me. And then after this, I'll be out by the model if anybody has any questions.
Hey Joe, one thing, we are still scheduling weddings. So I am here is like thinking of scheduling. We're still scheduling things, but it's all just we're scheduling it all in here. I didn't want to
again. You're stuck with me for the next 15 minutes. We'll leave about 5 minutes at the end for questions. So we are midway through our fiscal year. So I'm going to give you an update through December 31st, 2017. Get me closer, don't we? All right, so before we begin, do we have anyone from the Finance Committee in the House? Stand up. We have Adam Simcock, who's our brand new chairperson. We have Mark Schweitzer, who's our board rep. Jennifer Conroy, Alyssa Ryan Joy, and Chuck Evenson are all newer members. So let's give them a rousing round of applause. So I have 3 goals for the presentation today. The first is to remind you of our institution's financial landscape. So I'll tell you a little bit about what accounts we have, what we call our funds, etc. Second, I'll provide a financial update through December 31st, 2017, halfway through the year. I will also point out any areas where we've had variances of 10K or more from our budget. And then I'll provide food for thought on FUS's short-range, mid-range, and long-range outlooks. And then I'd also ask you to write down a couple of dates, some things that we're looking forward to. So let's take a quick look. You can see that we have 3 primary funds. Those are the capital fund, the designated and restricted fund, and the operating fund. And at the top of this image, you can see the primary sources of income. And at the bottom, we have the primary sources, or the primary expenses. So let's get down into it. Let's start by talking about some cash on hand. On this slide, you can see the comparison between last year and this year. Oopsie-daisy. So December 31st, 2016, you can see that we had $420K in the bank. As of December 31st, we had $1.87 million, so over 4.5 times what we had last year. As you can imagine, the majority of that is a result of the capital pledges that people have begun to pay. All right, so let's start with the operating fund. As you can see, we budgeted $1,027,000 year to date. We actually saw $1,042,000, so we exceeded our projections by $15K. Expenses, you can see that we budgeted $962,000. We only spent $924, so we experienced savings of $39,000. So the year-to-date budget was projecting a net income of $65,000. Great news, we actually saw a net income of $118,000, so a beautiful 54K variance. As I mentioned, I'm going to point out a couple of those areas where we have variances of 10K or more. Starting with the really great stuff, there are some areas that we saw additional income. For unpledged contributions, we budgeted $30,000, but we actually saw $48,000. So a variance of $17,000 or $18,000. Good catch. So $21K was from the Women's Alliance. $7,000 was for a hearing loop. $5,000 for an energy assessment, and $15,000 for other donations. Another interesting area where we actual income exceeded the budget was in unidentified stock donations. Many of you may know that we don't receive the identity of a person giving a stock donation unless somebody writes us a note or sends us an email. Our TD Ameritrade account doesn't disclose identities. So we have this wonderful, happy accident of having $41,000 just in the operating fund. We don't know gave it to us or why, but it's sitting in a little holding account here. And I will point out, those were all received before October 1st, which is when we did our kickoff for the capital campaign. So we're guessing that these are for the operating fund. They could indeed be capital, some early pledgers. All right, now moving on to areas where revenue was lower than expected. 2 areas. Rent was one. You can see that we budgeted $44,000. Actual income was $27,000, so a variance of $18K. So we had more parkers prepay in June of 2017. So they paid the entire year instead of paying monthly as we had anticipated they would. And fingers crossed, they'll do the same thing next June. So we would experience additional revenue at the end of the year. And then the other area was the event fundraising. So we had budgeted $50,000. Actual income was $30,000. Many of you know that we held the gala when was that? October. And we were hoping that we would just do one fundraising event this year, just do the gala. But however, we didn't see the income that we had anticipated, so we will do a cabaret again this year, make up that 20,000 plus, and all should be good at the end of the fiscal year. 82 days. You heard it here first. All right, so now to look at the expenses that were lower than expected. We had pension and program expenses. So as many of you know, we had a lot of new staff. New staff members don't begin to receive pension payments until after 1 full year of employment. So our pension payments this year was lower than anticipated. We budgeted $37K, we've actually spent $24, so a $13K negative variance. And then in terms of program expenses, pretty much across the board, all programmatic staff have spent $1,000 to $3,000 less than anticipated. So we had budgeted $75,000, we've only spent $50,000, so a savings of $25,000. All right, let's move on to capital. Fun stuff here. I will remind you that back in May, when we approved the budgets, we hadn't yet approved a capital campaign, which is why in income, you'll see we only have $1,000 projected. This next May, when we come together for the budget forum, we will obviously have an income and expenses projected for the next 2 years for the capital fund. Nonetheless, year-to-date budget was $1K. Actuals so far in pledge payments for the capital campaign have been $1,039,000. Expenses, we had budgeted $83K worth. We've only spent $71K. And so we have over $968K in net income in the capital fund currently. And last but not least, we have our designated and restricted funds. I wanted to tell you how many funds we have, but let me just catch up here. Ooh, I turned right to it. We have 29 funds ranging in totals from $31 to $53,000. Only 7 funds had activity year to date. You can see that we started off the year with $173,000 in our designated and restricted funds. We have seen $52,000 worth of new designated or restricted income. We've made $67,000 worth of planned transfers to other FUS accounts. We have experienced $23,000 worth of expenses in the designated funds. And finally, we're at the end of 2017, have an ending balance of $135,000. So no FUS financial update would be complete without discussion of pledges. So I'll remind you that pledging is always a 2-step process, right? You pledge or communicate the amount that you intend to give. Ideally, that's around March of each year, and then you pay. And usually those payments begin around July 1st of the fiscal year and end around June 30th, or maybe you give a one lump sum, which is lovely as well. You can see our annual campaign this year, which began in February of 2017, has had a lofty pledge goal of $1.22 million. Typically, it's around 1.2. So as of January 29th, we have received 789 pledges, totaling $1,187,000. So though we're about $33K shy of where we had hoped to be, with a $118K surplus year to date, I'm feeling pretty confident about where we'll end the year. Last year, we ended the fiscal year with about a $10K deficit. I'm going to place my bets that we're going to end this year with about a $10K surplus. You can place your bets as well after the meeting, just find me. But all in all, I say we're doing pretty well. So those were pledges. Let me talk about pledge payments. So year to date, we had budgeted $638K worth of pledge payments. We've actually seen 636, so just 2K shy of that theoretical goal. Last year at this time, we were 27K under budget in terms of our pledge payments. And the average pledge payment year to date over the last 5 years is typically $629,000. So we've exceeded that average by $7,000. All right, so just in closing, a little bit of food for thought. Future of pledge income. Things are changing. As Karen referenced a little bit, when things change, people do funny things. And we hope that that funny thing is not stop paying pledges, but we're going to keep an eye on it, and we'll keep you updated as we learn more. So we're going to be especially conservative in these next 3 years in terms of anticipating pledge payments. Next, reserve fund for cash flow assistance. At different points of the fiscal year, our expenses exceed our income. And typically we resolve that cash flow issue by giving ourselves loans, essentially. So we'll dip into a capital fund or dip into a designated fund in order to ensure we have adequate cash until income increases again, right? Well, a smarter way of doing that, as you all probably know, balancing your own checkbooks, would be to have maybe $150,000 to dip into when we have periodic cash flow issues. So I think this would be a long-term goal. It could be 5 to 10 years, but that we set the intention of setting aside cash to dip into so that we don't have to worry about dipping into designated or restricted funds. Does that make sense? Okay, great. And then third, personnel expenses. So this is something you'll hear more about in the annual campaign this year. How many of you knew or know that the UUA has recommended salary guidelines for all UU staff? I love how engaged you all are. Not many people know that. I'd say about half of the people in this room know. We're not meeting those guidelines. Predominantly, we are paying less than the UUA would recommend, and I would urge us to think about that, especially as we become closer and closer with our denomination. I would anticipate that would be a dynamic that we see over these next 3 years. As we try to hire new candidates with strong UUA affiliations, they're going to push us to pay those recommendations. So let's make sure that we're setting aside money to do that. And last but not least, as I mentioned, I'd really urge you to mark your calendars. First, our annual campaign volunteer meeting, the very first one, is tomorrow at 5 p.m. Really thrilled that we have Larry and Larry as our co-chairs, Larry Fanland and Larry Johnson. Wonderful leadership to look forward to in the annual campaign this year. Annual campaign Weekend of Promise, which may be a term that you all know, but if you don't, it's when we really urge you to make your pledges for the year. That's coming up on March 3rd and 4th. Third, you ready? Cabaret is on Friday, May 4th. How many days? 80 some. So Cabaret is on Friday, May 4th. It'll be here. The team, which has met once, and you're still welcome to join, decided last week that the theme, can I tell them? Will be cruise-inspired. You know, think Bon Voyage, think, I don't know, funny karaoke music. I don't know. Lots to look forward to. And then fourth, the budget forum. So if you liked what you saw these last 15 minutes or you really hated it and wanted to tell me how much, come together on Sunday, May 6th, and we'll look at the budget and look at financials. All right. Dick Goldberg has a question. He asked if I knew exactly how underpaid staff was according to UUA guidelines, and I do. We're 100K under. So if 400 people increased their monthly pledge by $20, we could get to exactly where we needed to be. What percentage is I don't know, but look in your annual campaign materials. But keep this number, repeat this many times, $20 more a month. If 400 people did that, we could meet the guidelines.
Anybody at the midpoint?
Yes, there are individuals at the midpoint. Yeah. Other questions? Thanks, everybody. Oh, one more. Yeah, Paula.
What is the average pledge amount?
I don't want to speak out of turn. Molly, do you remember the numbers off the top of your head? What's our average pledge amount? There's median mode. Look in my newsletter article next month for more information. 800 people typically give, but I don't want to misquote how much they give on average. Final questions? Going once, going twice? Sold.
All right, so next up is Interim Minister Search Task Force, and just to confirm, no members are in the audience, right? I know Rob and Mary Savage are off. Well, we're cross-country skiing up north. And every single member of the task force had a conflict today, so we're stuck with me updating. Yep, just that, sorry. Are we back? Yeah. So the task force members, I have to say, this is another group that has been just pouring their heart and soul into helping ensure the future of the congregation by working on the interim minister search. The number of hours that they have put into this is unbelievable. I'm privy to all their emails back and forth. They always CC me on them. Aside from the witty banter that actually happens and the discussions of ice fishing and why that's important, a lot has been happening, and they've been working on just, well, you'll see here. We'll talk. I'm going to talk about the timeline of events that they have worked on. They have a report from the Interim Minister Search Task Force that we are doing here. We're going to talk about what you can expect from the overall process for the next 4 months and what we need from you all in this room. So the timeline, the first thing they really happened is this kind of belies. They spent about 4 months researching what has to happen during the interim search. What do we need to be prepared for? Talking to a lot of people and really setting out a timeline. So the first real actionable item for them came in January, where they told the UUA that that Michael was leaving. So they did this. And one thing that was interesting with the UUA is, as I saw the communications back and forth, is we're on top of this, way more than other congregations have been around the country, almost catching the UUA off guard as to how far along we had come already without their help and where we wanted to go and how fast we wanted to get there. So April 17th, it's the due date for our submission for the interim application to the UUA. That's already being worked on. Then on April 30th or May 1st, we're uncertain which of those dates, the congregations that have put their names in for wanting an interim minister are actually, will actually be given 3, I believe, applications or so, or maybe a few more that we start to get to go through. We get to conduct some interviews and then make some recommendations. We have about 7, 8, 9 days to make this turnaround to where they're going to be coming in front of the board and telling us who they suggest that we ought to try to hire. Because then on May 11th, which is again about 10 days after, maybe 11 days after this all opens up, we have to make an offer. And if we miss that, someone else might get the person that we want. And Rob Savage and I, along with other task force members, have talked to other congregations that this has happened to, where if you don't move fast enough, or if you mess around a little bit too much with trying to negotiate with an interim, you can lose them. So if we find an interim that we really like and we really want to bring him or her into our congregation, we have to be able to move fast. So the task force has been working on all of the preparation to make sure that all this moves as fast as humanly possible. So they've created a work plan with deliverables. That's the one thing we've been doing with our task forces, is looking at what goals do we have set forth in front of us, what tasks do we have to have accomplished, and what are the dates, and what is the timeline for accomplishing those. We've connected with the UUA to better understand the process. We've documented a communication plan, both internal and external, and you've been seeing some of that show up, and you will start seeing that show up in the newsletters. They created an electronic packet to share with potential candidates, and this was interesting. They put together a pretty significant packet, not just on the FUS community, but on Madison as a whole. That's really, they were talking about the importance of ice fishing and whether or not that was good to highlight the fact that we have ice fishing. I believe it ended up coming out of the packet. But the useful thing about that is that packet then was used by the music director search team to create one for them. Yeah, so it was really nice, and a lot of time went into that. So we should almost make that available to people, because it's kind of neat to see how they described our community. We documented the CEO responsibilities of the senior ministers. So Rob Savage and I sat down with Monica, Kelly, and Michael and just asked them separately, what does the CEO of FUS do, so that we could start thinking about what should this interim minister do. And then we also formally informed the UUA of our need for an interim minister. They also had conversations, well, I actually had conversations with large congregations, because there's a president's phone call of large congregations that happens every month that I sit on. And so I've been asking about the congregations that have gone through the interim search. And at times it was kind of like, oh, it's that bad? So it gave us a lot of good lessons learned. You know, things that they did wrong, things that they wish they would have done that they didn't do. And then we went out to look for congregations that had very good experiences, and we found a few. And we heard about, with sort of the best practice of, if you want to have a successful interim, what type of preparation did they do to really make that happen. You may have noticed that we began tabling around the weekend services on the opposite weekends that the board tables. If you notice, the board has been trying to have a table every other week, just to inform and just stand around and have people ask us questions. So the interim minister search task force has been doing the same on those opposite weekends. They met with staff to get input and also to educate them about the interim process search itself and what it's going to be like to have an interim minister. Rob Savage just did this a few days ago, and to get input from the staff as to what are they looking for from the interim. Because as we're putting together really sort of what we're looking for, we are trying to see what the staff need, what does membership need, what do we, you know, as a board need from an interim in the governance way, so that we can try to find the best possible person. And then we also are updating the parish at this meeting right now. So what do we want? What have we learned? So we found out we want this interim to work closely with Kelly and Monica, the rest of the staff, and the board. It is someone that is, obviously, we're going to look for them to help us through the discernment process to look at what type of things we want to change, but we also want someone that's going to listen to us. We don't want someone just to come in and just start knocking down walls and changing everything without getting to know who we are, because we have a lot of good things that are going on already. That's kind of what this second bullet point gets into. We also want someone that's going to be motivated to look at every aspect of FUS in order to recommend and carry forward the changes. We want them to work with us to help accomplish the plans outlined in our strategic plan. So we don't want someone to come in here and just rip up the strategic plan that we spent the last 12 months developing, but to see that we kind of have our stuff organized, and we want them to work with us on this. And we have heard of congregations where the interim will come in, rip everything up, start breaking down walls without really getting to know the congregation. So we've heard some bad stories around that, so we're working hard to make sure that doesn't happen to us here. That gets into being the team player. And we also wanted someone to provide guidance and wisdom to help us transition from Michael's ministry. So we are looking from this interim to really help bridge the gap between Michael and our next senior minister. And one of the big things that we think there is to have good preaching to keep us all engaged and excited throughout the process. We've talked to some congregations that have seen 40% plus memberships drop out during the interim because it wasn't carried out properly. So we're cognizant of that, and we're going to try to be very careful to make sure that doesn't happen here. And one of the big ways to do that is keep everyone in this room, including ourselves, engaged in the process and excited about the changes that are happening. So the task force to-do list, holy cow, look at this. So there's a lot going on, as I said. So they're going to be conducting some adult religious education classes about the interim. If you want to learn more, a 2-hour program is going to be put forward on February 25th at 1:30. That's, I believe, a Sunday. And then also on the 27th, which is a Tuesday at 6:30. So that's a class you can sign up for to learn more about this. And there is childcare available if you are a parent. You do have to raise your hand and say you want childcare as you're signing up, but you can have that available. There's going to be a newsletter update that's coming out in this upcoming March newsletter. Well, upcoming in like 3 weeks. We are writing our articles now, so it's current to me. But in the March newsletter, they're going to complete the UUA transition form before April 17th. And now there's one thing that was interesting. As an interim task force was digging into what are the questions that are on the UUA website, we felt they weren't detailed enough to really get into our type of congregation, which led to this creation of this packet that they created that we're going to send on to interims that are interested in the position. If an interim in the next few weeks even were to reach out and say, hey, I'm an intern and we're interested in this, we can send that packet on to them as well to start the process. We are participating in exit interviews by the UUA. That's happening on the 14th of March. They're coming in, they're flying in to interview the board along with one of the task force members and Michael to start, from the UUA standpoint, to start getting a handle as to where we're at and what we're going to be looking for. The task force is also going to, as I mentioned, recommend to the board the role of the interim to the staff and the board. They're going to establish an interview process, a format and questions. Really, because they only have several days to do all this, they're going to be as prepped as they possibly can. They're actually on the task force. There's some members whose job is to create interview questions. So we actually have a really nice diverse group that is working on this. They're going to determine the salary and other costs of the interim minister and seek board approval on that. I have a slide on that as to what we can expect. And draft a contract and seek board input and approval on what that contract will be with the interim. Overall, it's a year-long contract that's then renewable. There's always an out clause for both the congregation and the interim if it's not working out well, and that is a good thing to have. So salary expectations is basically, long story short, is the UUA has these guidelines, and across the board, we're supposed to be using the mid of the range, which is $136,000. It does not include benefits. We're about 25%, or FICA, the Social Security taxes. So overall, this should come to about $180,000 a year higher that we have to bring on board. A little bit of budgetary pressure. Not that much more than what we are currently experiencing right now, with Michael leaving and someone coming in, but it's still more from my rude calculations, about $20,000, not rudimentary calculations, about $20,000, I believe, more. So what happens once we have an interim? We're going to have another task force. So it's been like the year of task forces, and we're going to have yet another task force that's going to help support the interim. We're developing the charter for that task force. We're going to identify the number and characteristics of the task force membership as we go forward here. And this is something that we're trying to do, is make sure that we have a wide reach of members be a part of these task forces, because we want as many different voices involved. Because again, this is a community endeavor. We want to make sure that we're capturing as many different opinions and thoughts as we're trying to move this forward. We also then want to recruit the members to that. We'll want to welcome the interim minister. There will be an orientation at FUS here, welcomed by staff, board, and the congregation, and begin the interim process. So the interim's goals overall are going to be partially to say goodbye to Michael. Now, this interim won't be here for this, but shh, don't tell anyone, because everyone knows. June 10th, after 11 a.m. service, we're going to be saying goodbye to Michael officially. That will be his going away party of sorts. We are looking for some additional members for that committee. If anyone's interested in joining, please come up to me after this meeting today. The interim is going to really help us examine who we are and where we want to go. They're going to try to encourage us to try new ways to do things. So we're going to try to not hold everything sacred that we are doing, but rather try new things and change things up a bit. And begin the search for a new minister. So about 6 months into the interim's role here, we are going to be constituting yet another task force, which will be the search for the official replacement for Michael. And we'll start that about 6 months after the interim is here. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to Rob Savage and also attend an RE class. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to my clicker. We're back. But also drop by the table that they have and ask questions. And if you see any of the interim search task force members, you can ask them as well. Yes. Or me.
Does the interim actually come candidate here before he or she is elected?
No. That's actually the board's decision as to who the interim will be to be selected. We only have a few days to make the decision.
And when does the interim actually start?
August, I believe. Is that your feel? August, September? Yeah. Yes?
Seeing as how there's a limited number of interims, do you have any idea how many congregations are looking for an interim that will be paying with, and how many are available?
That's a great question. I don't. We will. Sure, the question was, do we know how many congregations are looking for interims and how many interims are available? So what's the supply and demand, basically, is the big question. And I would even add an even more complicated question. How many large congregations are out there and how many interims are used to working with large congregations are available? So that's a great question that we can ask them on the 14th of March, that is. Yes, sir?
I don't understand what if I'm an interim minister candidate, what am I looking for? What's the purpose of this in my career of service as an interim minister?
Yeah. Is Karen still here? I saw her. Karen just left. So Karen is an interim minister. So Dort, did you want to try to?
Well, I don't know how much this would answer your question, but.
So one thing, Max Gabler, after he retired from here, became an interim minister and did several different interims. I think the first one was in Australia. So for one type of minister, it is a way to transition from settled ministry. Another thing that's happened since Max retired is that the whole interim ministry has become, I would say, professionalized. So there are ministers who actually like doing this kind of work, and that's their career, and that's what they do. And she knows even more.
Yeah, so a couple things about that. As Dorit said, for some ministers, it is that they are retiring, but they're not ready to completely stop yet. And so they've got a lot of wisdom that they've gotten over all these years, and they can go a lot of, like someone like Max or now Michael could go to smaller or mid-sized congregations and really take what they've learned here and help them in the 2 years get ready for growth. Because a lot of congregations get stuck in these stages between certain sizes. And the nice thing about being an interim and why some folks love doing this is that as an interim, there's no really nice way to say this. You don't have to care if the congregation likes you. You're there for a short period of time, and your role really is to see this institution with fresh eyes and to say to people, I know you've done it this way for the past 30 years, but I can just tell you it's not the healthiest way to do it, and you may get really mad at me for saying it, but this here needs to change. And there are folks who really thrive in the list of names that we get in what's called round number 1, hopefully you are matched with an interim in this round number 1, you only receive the names of accredited interim ministers. So these are folks who have gone through training, quite a lot of intensive training on systems theory and change models and leadership models. And they then become, according to the UUA, accredited interim ministers. And these are folks who thrive on learning about family systems theory, how do emotional systems work in congregations, how do you impact change? How do you help model different forms of leadership? So that's why people want to do it. For some, it's really fascinating work.
So this is not meant to at all diminish the what we're undertaking or the fact that, some congregations had some not great experiences. But as I've been talking with Rob lately, he has told me more than once with kind of a twinkle in his eye, he says that even the congregations he's spoken to whose interim ministry experience was less than great have ended up being just thrilled with their final settlement. And he was really excited about that. So I wanted to share that with you.
That's fair. And I heard that too from everyone who had a bad experience. One even said we would take the bad experience because of the senior minister that we ended up with was so phenomenal. So, good point. It's been happy endings at the end of it, but it could just, for some of them, it was a little bit painful. Yes?
Will there still be an intern during the interim?
Yes.
An intern during there will be, for sure.
Yeah, they're on board.
Okay. Right, because we already hired someone. Yes.
This is probably the wrong time to ask this question, but we have a named facility in our buildings that honors our previous minister, the Gabler Living Room. Is there any plan to so honor Michael in these present proceedings?
There's been some talk. What? Exploring? Here, why don't you answer? I think
So we're exploring the option, but I think we're also keeping in mind what Michael would want. So weighing those two things. Definitely want to make sure that his legacy is named and honored, but let's make sure Michael's comfortable with whatever we do too.
Thank you. Good question. Yes.
You used the term senior minister in your presentation. Has there been any consideration to a co-minister model?
Yes, and as I was saying senior minister, I was thinking I shouldn't say senior minister because what if someone brings up, what about this co-ministry model that we haven't decided on yet? So it was just by habit. So no, that will be part of the process that we'll have to, during discernment, what we want. So good catch. I was like, as I was saying, and I thought no one will catch that. One thing I did forget to mention during the interim process, the task force specifically asked me to say thank you to Chip Quaid, who's not a member of the task force, but basically you have been in some ways where you've helped them significantly, that they were super. Lorna made sure that I said something. So.
Did this amazing job on the packet for the interims, and I spent 5 minutes formatting it.
Yeah, no, it's more than that. Thank you. Many hands went into this, so. All right, any other questions on the interim? And I apologize if I don't know full well, but I know enough to be dangerous on it. Anything else? All right. Last but not least, we have the Music Director Search Task Force, Doug Hill. Do you want to use this one? And it's the right arrow.
I don't work this. There's just the two sides.
Yeah.
Is this working? Yes, good. Will the members of the Music Director Search Task Force, that's a big, long name, Search Committee, will the Search Committee members who are here right now stand up, please? You see their names? I have a few of them that are in the room. I'm going to read for you so that I don't babble on, and we can get it all covered, and I'll get done before the music starts and they run me off the stage. These members of the Music Director Search Task Force were selected from a number of volunteers in early August. The task force charter and the proposed timeline were created and submitted to the FUS Board of Trustees and approved on August 16th. Incidentally, all these processes that UUA have for interim ministers, they don't have for music directors. So we had to create the whole process from scratch, pretty much. No template. So by the end of our second meeting in late August, we had created and made available an original survey designed for congressional input, which we circulated in hard copy and made available online. The committee then considered seriously the thoughts and concerns shared through these surveys from many of you. We then began to design both the music director job description and our vision statement. While preparing the announcement, we included the general requirements for the position and all of the necessary application procedures. We also discussed at length website locations for posting the position opening, and we established a special email account for all the applicants' submissions. By mid-September, we had finalized the official job description after considering and including all equal opportunity, monetary, and legal guidelines. We then posted the position opening document online at Unitarian Universalist Music Network, at numerous national choral and church music organization websites, at the Organ Guild website, and most prominently on the FUS homepage and Facebook page. The deadline date for initial submission of materials was November 17th, gave them 2 months. After these 2 months of posting, we had received 32 completed letters of application along with the additional requested materials. They came to us from 19 different states and 1 European country. After all of these applications and materials were considered by the members of the committee, 10 candidates were selected to continue on, asking them to send us additional materials of their choosing this time, that might enhance our knowledge of their own personal, unique credentials. We also requested additional letters of recommendation. By mid-December, after all of these additional materials were considered, 6 candidates were selected to participate in internet video interviews. Preceding these interviews, each candidate was sent the present job outlines of all 3 of our FUS music staff. We also shared with them the packet that they were talking about here, which described the workings of FUS Madison. We modified it slightly, took out the part about the ice fishing. This packet had been prepared by the interim minister task force and generously made available to us. So, preceding these interviews, we simply wanted our continuing candidates to know us better. The specific interview questions and procedures were largely designed to inform us of the candidates' emotional intelligence and to introduce us to them face-to-face in a spontaneous conversational setting. During the first 2 weeks of January, Kelly Crocker officially joined our search task force and quite effectively, might I say, administered all 6 of the video interviews with the continuing candidates. The completed interviews totaled over 4 hours and were recorded for the committee. In mid-January, we had our marathon meeting, lasting 5.5 hours. We all watched all 6 interviews in a row. We then discussed our initial impressions and selected 4 candidates for our continued consideration. In the follow-up meeting, which was just 2 days later, we began planning for the specifics regarding many of the procedures for the on-site interview auditions. Also, after extensive discussions, we made the decision to invite 3 outstanding candidates to participate in our on-site interview auditions, while designating one of the candidates as an alternate on hold. 10 days later, one of the 3 invited candidates regretfully withdrew her name from consideration due to sudden family issues and newly adjusted local employment opportunities. As there was no set requirement by the committee or the board to audition any specific number of candidates, the committee voted to continue on with our top 2 exceptional finalists. Looking forward from where we are now, this is hypothetical, but it looks pretty set. But looking forward, these are what our plans are. During the final weeks of February into March, we have invited these 2 truly outstanding candidates to spend 3 days each meeting with the FUS staff, with members of the Board of Trustees, with the search committee, and with our 2 continuing music staff. Each finalist will get a tour of our facilities, take a tour of the city of Madison, and formally audition with many of our choir members. The candidates have been asked to prepare and conduct a work familiar to our choirs, and then present, rehearse, and teach a musical selection of their choosing, which the choir will be sight reading. Following that, we will have them perform 3 contrasting short pieces at the keyboard, and then take time for questions. We also plan to follow it all up with a brief social gathering. The next day, they will attend the Friday Musicale, if it is not snowed out. After these 2 on-site visits, the committee will meet, consider input from our staff and from the choir members who will serve as representatives of this wonderful congregation. There may be as many as 40 or 50 in the choir for these auditions. We will review all pertinent and applicable materials which were made available to the committee over the previous 7 months, all the materials sent to us by these 2 candidates. We will consider the details of the auditions and the on-site interviews, and then discuss fully these 2 remarkable individuals. Our plan is to arrive at our selection for the new music director by mid-March. The task force will then submit its final recommendation to President Joe Kremer and the FUS Board of Trustees for official acceptance. The new music director is officially scheduled to begin on July 1, 2018. After we make this recommendation to the board, the committee no longer exists. That's what it says, right at the bottom of it. So from there on, it's the board that hires the music director. I personally want to thank the members of our committee for their many, many hours of work reading and considering not only the candidates' materials, but also my numerous, might you say, emails. We also do appreciate the Board of Trustees' confidence in the sincerity of our work towards the goal of continuing our truly substantial and inspirational music program. I also want to thank Dan Broner for many years of incredible music making among us. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Perfect. We're about to finish early. I'm trying to think, do we just take the time, or, you know, one thing I just want to point out that I'm really excited about, and this is not in the agenda, but mid-March, about the 3rd week in March, we're bringing in Reverend Tendeka, I believe. Did I say that close enough? Close. And this is something that Michael really was interested in, really wanted us to do. He saw it as a great opportunity because Reverend Tandenka, thank you, has a really unique way, at least from what I've read, a unique way of looking at race relations and implicit bias, how a congregation like ours can really start to question ourselves, not just how can we improve the situation, but what are we doing as a congregation, unknowingly, unwittingly, and not even thinking about, that actually might not help, I guess, might be the right answer. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be hopefully a slightly difficult discussion with workshops that are going to lead into service and music that is going to sort of really focus on the topic and get us to think. And it's about a 10-day period that she's going to be here, but it's not just a 10-day period. It's really a 10-day beginning of us thinking about this and thinking about what do we want to do to change within our community, if there's things we want to change, and how we're going to go about changing. And it's something that has been bubbling around the UUA. If any of you have followed the last year at the UUA, there's been some rocky road around this issue that has caused a lot of issues, and Michael really thought it would be important for us to, as a community, come together and start discussing it and seeing what can we do to change and help. So just mark your calendars. It's the third week in March, starting on, I believe, the 17th of March, running all the way through the 25th, 26th of March. There will be 2 weekends of services with her that she's going to be interacting, I believe, with Dan and Michael and other members of the ministry team to change up service and really get us to think and focus. So think about that. There's for sure a workshop on Wednesday. I believe that's board. Actually, there's a workshop on Wednesday evening, and then there's even another workshop on Friday, and then almost all day on Saturday, the 25th. So there's some information out there. This upcoming newsletter will have more information on it, but look into that, because I think it's going to be an interesting opportunity for us to start almost the discernment process that the interim is going to be carrying forward with us. Like, just start to get us to think a little bit differently. I think it's going to have a huge impact on our community. So just some final words. And if you want to learn anything more about any of the things that we talked about on the agendas and up on the board here, our contact information, always for me, fuspres@gmail.com. If you have any questions on our governance model or what the board is doing, or if you have concerns, email me. I typically respond to those as fast as I can. So, closing from TK. Thank you, Chip. As you started, you're closing us out, keeping us on task. So, all you. Thank you.
Yep. Hi, I'm TK Browning. I'm the interim minister, not the interim minister. I'm actually out. I'm leaving as soon as this interim minister gets here, if anyone wants to join me. I'm actually, more than halfway done already. Quite a bit more than halfway done with this internship. Tuesday is Tandeka's public lecture, not Wednesday. I'm leading a small group of like a prep team for that. So if anyone has any questions, would like to contribute, tkayb@fusmadison.org is my email address. I have the final reading. We had a lovely donation from a member who I don't think is here. If you are, raise your hand and I will recognize you. No? Her father passed, who is also, I believe, a member here, left a lovely Buddhist collection of books, including a full collection, not full, but a large collection of these Shambhalaya library books, which I love and are going to be in my office until I leave, and then you guys can have them. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, one of my favorite works of Eastern religion. Every existence in nature, every existence in the human world, every cultural work that we create is something which was given, or is being given to us, relatively speaking. But as everything is originally one, we are, in actuality, giving out everything. Moment after moment, we are creating something, and this is the joy in our lives. But this I, which is creating and always giving out something, is not the small I, but the big I. Even though you do not realize the oneness of this big I with everything, when you give out something, you feel good. Because at that time you feel at one with what you are giving. This is why it feels better to give than to take. You can look this up for yourself, God-giving. We have a saying, Dana, Prajna, Paramita. Dana means to give, Prajna is wisdom, and Paramita means to cross over or to reach the other shore. Our life can be seen as a crossing of a river. The goal of our life's effort is to reach the other shore, nirvana. Prajna Paramita, the true wisdom of life, is that in each step of the way, the other shore is actually reached. To reach the other shore with each step of the crossing is the way of true living. Blessed be. Go in peace.
And before we go, I hope you all are aware of the amount of work that Joe has put into getting ready for this meeting, but also serving the congregation. So we can thank Joe. Thanks very much.